It's 5 p.m. here in Finland, so it's time to start tonight's webinar. Greetings from our headquarters in Jyväskylä, Finland, and welcome to today's Firstbeat Sports webinar, The Future of High Performance in US Soccer, Integrating Sports Science, Coaching and Context, with our hosts, sports scientist James Malone and his panelists Adam Granger, David Tenney, and Gavin Benjafield. I'm Tina Hoffman, exercise physiologist and master trainer at Firstbeat, and today I'll just say a few words for starters before I turn it over to the guys. Today's webinar will last 1 hour, and we are going to make a recording, and you'll get a link to that afterwards. You can write questions in the Q&A box during the session, and James and the team will reply to them either during or after the discussion. If we don't have time for all the questions, then we'll reply to them afterwards. A couple of words about Firstbeat, because we do have some new listeners online. But for those who are new to us, please check out the Firstbeat website, because we have a lot of information there about our background and all that we do. Our sports business specializes in providing physiological solutions for team sports. We have over 1,000 professional sports teams in all the major leagues around the world who use the Firstbeat Sports platform to optimize their team and individual performance, provide detailed insights about athletes' load and recovery specifically. Over 300 research projects around the world have utilized the Firstbeat methods in their studies. And in addition to that, we have over 1,000 wellness professionals who use the Firstbeat Live solution with their clients. If you have questions about Firstbeat solutions or how to use the tools, don't hesitate to reach out to us directly afterwards. But now, James, it's great to have you back in our Firstbeat webinar. I'll give the stage to you so you can introduce your panel and take it from here. Welcome, guys.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Tina. Appreciate the introduction. And welcome to the panel as well. So yeah, really pleased we could get these three guys on the panel today, because it is the off season, it's holiday time. So, you know, these gentlemen are giving up their valuable time to be with us today. So thank you very much. So very brief introduction. We've got Gavin Benjafield, who's the performance director at LAFC. Dave Tenney, who I'm sure everyone knows as well, is a high performance director at Atlanta United. And lastly is Adam Granger, who's head of physical performance and player wellness at Chicago Fire FC Academy. So welcome, guys. Thanks very much for coming.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
We've got a lot of experience on the panel. I think over 70 years of experience once we add everything up. So if that doesn't make you feel old, I don't know what will. But we'll kind of start. Obviously, we're at the end of the season now. We're in the sort of reflective period as well. So I just wanted to start off thinking about, you know, the previous season and I guess the evolution of the MLS and things like the academy structure and things like this. So maybe I'll start with you, Gavin, just to kind of, I guess, reflect on 2025, the season, the challenges and the things that you faced.
Yeah, thanks, James. Great to be chatting with you as well as Dave and Adam. Yeah, landscape's definitely going to change. I would say that 2025 was the last regular, if you could call it that, regular MLS season. We're a league that, for those that don't know, our preseason starts around mid-January, our first game in March, and then we go all the way through kind of deep into November. If you're really going deep in the playoffs, then you're going until early December. But that's the past. Like from next year with the World Cup break, there's going to be a big wedge in our season. So we're almost going to have two halves to a season. 2027, we're going to have something called a sprint season. So we don't play as many games, but it's going to be a full season, but only in a couple of months. So about 4.5 months, we're going to finish the season. And that is the way that we're going to align to the European calendar and go way more in line with European schedule, as well as the FIFA windows and such. So I think that we could all say farewell to a regular MLS season. Challenges for us personally at LAFC. We got to hear very early that our coach it was his last season. He'd chosen to go back to Germany. But this announcement was early. This was in maybe April, May. So you still have a number of the months left. You then obviously have the transfer window in June, July. You start getting new players in. So we had a new lease of life. Obviously, Sonny joining us from Tottenham was a good lease of life. Gave us a lot of momentum going in. But fell short in the playoffs. So made it into the playoffs, but just didn't have enough firepower to get past Vancouver away from home. So another long season, another 50 plus games for us, which is the third season in a row that we've done that. So I think that that's wearing down on the players a little. And we obviously need to take note of that. Next year, as I said, it's going to be a little bit different. So we're going to, each one of us, Dave, Adam, and I, are going to have to navigate almost a different course next year because it's going to look different. And we got to obviously see how the players adapt physiologically, mentally, to this change of season.
Nice, very nice. And I guess as well this year, Gavin, you've had the challenge of the FIFA Club World Cup as well thrown into the mix and things. So how
Yeah.
do you kind of prioritize competitions through the year as well?
Yeah, really good one. So that was a very late. This kind of got handed to us as a late entry, obviously because of some rules and regulations. So we were caught off guard a little. I don't think that we were fully prepared. We gave it our best shot. We went out there. We had to change base camps because the base camp that we were set up on, we just didn't feel was suitable for the players. And so yeah, 3 games in the middle of nowhere kind of added to the agenda, and then it does honestly become about prioritizing competitions. You just may not have the depth of your squad to be able to chase all competitions. And so, as much as everyone wants to win every game, every competition, sometimes you have to start ranking and prioritizing certain competitions over others, and that's just a transparent conversation that we have as a soccer operations department, technical staff, us in the medical and the performance, and then you have to draw players into that conversation as well. Because if you chase after everything, you may end up with nothing. But if you're able to prioritize and rank, and yes, it doesn't always go according to plan, I think you set yourself up more for success when you do that.
Nice, very nice. And moving on to Dave now, obviously end of the first full season for you at Atlanta. Certainly not moved around the MLS scene, so you've seen everything that there has to be seen.
Yeah.
What was your reflections on the season, how it went? Obviously a bit of a tough season for the club itself, but any new learnings or things that you can take away?
Um, yeah, I mean, obviously I will be going into my third season with a third different coach, which is a new place for me, which I think is kind of representative of where the league is at. I think, now this next year, my first year in MLS was in 2007 in Kansas City, and over time you've seen, as there's more money within the league, the teams are building infrastructure, teams are more ambitious, better players want to come over. Um, I think there's a level of volatility that's slowly becoming more like Europe in terms of how long coaches are in place and signing players. And then at the same time, I think our academy system is being built out well. There's a lot of teams, and I think Atlanta is one where we have 5, 6 homegrown players on our roster. And so you have this mix of player signings from all over the world, academy players you're trying to integrate, more coaching changes. And in some ways that is, I think, more like Europe. Some of the challenges of, and I'm sure that Gavin can speak to this a lot, of the mid-season signings. And yes, our league is going to change in 2027 when the new structure comes in, but it's been extremely hard to sign players that come in to start your season, which also often means you end up, like we did this year, signing 3 to 4 players in the summer window, which then they can only play the last 10 games. And some teams actually purposely go light until they get these signings. And so you have this mix of players coming in late during preseason, academy, younger kids that have never kind of had to tolerate the loads of a pro season, and then players coming in mid-season, which I think creates some unique challenges. And for us, I think we've got players from all over the world, and lots of Eastern Europeans and Scandinavians and South Americans, and getting everyone on the same page, getting everyone fit and physically where they need to be is a huge challenge. Now I think one of the main reasons why they are switching to this calendar change in 2027 is so that there's less of that. But I think what's happening is, as teams are more ambitious, you're getting, and then also there's the mechanisms of players getting green cards where then they're considered American, they're considered a US national once they get their green card. And so, you know, oftentimes I think last year we had three players that came in late to preseason because they're waiting for their green card because they want to be counted as a US national so that opens up spots for other players to be signed once those green cards go through. And as a result, you get players that are kind of all over the map physically. The league typically also is leaned on older players from Europe, as you know, some older, with players with pedigree, and the challenges around them coming to a league with really different environmental factors is challenging. And so um, we, we had a lot of all of those things this year, in Atlanta that I think present issues and challenges over the year. And sometimes you manage them well, and sometimes you do the best you can with the hand you're dealt. But I do feel like that's just exponentially increased those types of situations as the league has continued to evolve. And you obviously have seen our league with players like Sonny and Thomas Muller that come in mid-season and the team takes off. But that's not always the case. It can go just as easily the other way with some of these big summer signings. So
Yeah, and obviously next season with a new Argentinian coach coming in as well,
yep.
Different culture. Maybe he'll bring his friend Messi as well. Maybe we'll see. Probably not.
Probably not. But it will be that then it'll be a very, I'm sure, culture shift with a more of a South American based roster that's also used to working in a certain way. And yeah, there'll be the league is such a melting pot of different types of coaches and cultures and general managers that the rosters can turn over and radically change from year to year based on, who's doing player acquisition and who's doing uh, uh, and who's coaching the team.
Nice, brilliant. And just moving on to Adam to round this bit off as well. Just, I think you're about 6 months into the role, lad, since you come over from Europe, and I've known you for a while now. I know you've got a lot of experience in different sports as well. So, what's been your take so far on the American dream, the experience?
Yeah, oh no, it's been very enjoyable. I totally sentiment what David and Gavin have said. It's an evolving league, and probably to provide more context to the challenges and realities of working in the league from an academy perspective. As James said, I work with our academy and our next pro group, essentially our second team. The added context there is that the academy groups are a European season. So therefore you have players moving between programs. You get an academy player stepping up to a second team or a first team training program, and it's managing and evolving their 12-month program is difficult at times. When do they get their off season? When do they get their ability for, to chase long-term development? So yeah, that's been a challenge and something that's obviously different to other leagues. The other thing I see in the US setting is obviously, US have their, the way their major leagues approach sports, and um, the college system in soccer in the States also provides a further development opportunity for players. So if you're a 17-year-old that, hasn't yet broken into, say, a first team environment, you may choose to go the college route and, get an education as well as a footballing background. But again, it's how does the MLS club work with the college in terms of continuing that long-term player development for that player, and then ultimately, bringing them back in as a homegrown player to their environment in the future. So it's all good learnings, and obviously, as the guy said, a very, very different contextual model.
Nice. And how have you found the comparison, I guess, in Europe and even like in the UK? We often see a gap between the academy structure and that first team senior level, and that final step is often the hardest one. Is it a similar scenario in the States, or do you find the gap is smaller?
Yeah, it's a good question. I I wouldn't like to put my answer on it yet, as only being relatively new into the role. What I would say is that the US, in comparison to Europe, obviously has a slightly different approach in terms of what athletic development looks like. And obviously, US is very strong in their traditional sports of how that looks. But obviously, there's a big European and other influence into MLS in terms of coaching philosophy, playing models, and as I say, that sort of development of talent. So I think to answer the question, I think that's still evolving, and I feel that MLS and the country of America in terms of soccer development are probably still defining what is actually their approach there.
Nice. So yeah, jury's still out, like you say, still investigating from your side. But just moving on slightly, gents, to I guess more around sort of coaching and planning and programming as well. So I think Gavin, you've already mentioned about the challenges this season, 50 games and trying to manage the schedule. So could you give us a bit of an insight into, I guess, firstly, periodization, microcycle, and also, how to integrate that with the coaching staff as well?
Yeah. We've had some really different looking seasons. And so we've had a season where we started because we didn't have Champions League. Now it's obviously called Champions Cup, but I think Champions League just sounds way better. We didn't have Champions League football, so we literally were playing one game a week on the weekend for the first, I think it was 12 weeks after preseason. So then your textbook kind of comes out, your tactical periodization, your 4 or 5 day lead in. And then we've had seasons where we've started with 13 games in 35 days. And then you throw the book out, you throw the manual out, and you're literally just swimming upstream for those 35 days. And so I think we've brought it in a little bit into the discussion that it is a bit chaotic. It's pretty unpredictable up until New York City's exit in the playoffs. We were either going to be in the Champions League or we were not going to be in the Champions League just because of placement. And then we were going to have that situation of a very different calendar. And so I literally had built out almost 2 periodization calendars waiting for the end result of, well, which one is it going to be? So we are in Champions League. We are going to hit that 13 games in 35 days. And so we have to really adapt our microcycles. We have to teach ourselves and teach our athletes how to have 3 day preparations, 2 day preparations, and even 1 day preparations towards games. Because if you want to just try and get into the cyclic 4 or 5 day lead in, it doesn't suit the calendar that you're about to approach. And I think that Dave and Adam would kind of attest to this as well, is it's pretty irregular throughout the season. So you could have that 13 in 35, and then all of a sudden you pop your head out and it's 8 in 8 weeks. And so there's a little bit of confusion in my head in terms of like, well, how is the scheduling adaptive, and how do you go from a high density period into a non-density period at all? I know that there's a question right at the end about improvements, and that's probably going to be one of my top in terms of how we can improve as a league in terms of scheduling. But yeah, the periodization is totally based on the number of competitions. We had the Leagues Cup competition introduced. Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. Has it been 3 or 4 seasons now? I think it's in that.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that added an extra month to the calendar. All of a sudden, we were just like, hey, we're going to play a competition, Liga MX, MLS, number of games, traveling, non-traveling. And so each season almost seems to be you have to rewrite the playbook of what the periodization microcycle looks like. And Dave's is going to be different to mine. Adam's is going to be different. And you really got to plot your own course based on the competitions that you're in and the days that you're traveling and when you're coming back. So it's a good challenge. I love it. I love that there's not just this monotony of it looks like the same plan every single year. And I've been with LAFC for 8 years, and I think I've written 8 different plans for my preseason as well as the first 12 weeks of the season.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point actually to be proactive in that approach, and I see it so much with practitioners being so reactive to the days, the weeks, and as you describe, if you can cover different scenarios and align that with the coaching staff as well, I think that's a great way to go forward. And I think, Dave, just to get your opinion on this as well, I know obviously you've got strong background in periodization as well. I know you've done the course on tactical periodization in Portugal. Have you any thoughts on, periodization structure from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's what we think is the ideal, but I also think, the one piece to kind of what Gavin was discussing was around travel, right? I think what makes this league so unique is the travel, and there is what you might think is ideal. Oftentimes, what I find, with a coach, one of the first decisions you have to make is, you play on Saturday. Do you come in on Sunday and take Monday off? Do you take Sunday off, come in on Monday? And, almost exclusively that will be determined by, am I traveling or am I not traveling? Right? Because I do think there's times when both can be the right case, but it is it is exceptionally hard to have an away match of any kind. And now this is me coming from an East Coast team. I think this is different if you're Gavin and you're on Pacific time, but it's extremely hard coming as an East Coast team and having any home game, or sorry, away game that you're home before 1 or 2 a.m., right? And if it's anything outside of your own um, time zone, then you're getting home at 3 to 4 a.m. Even if we play Chicago, Chicago's in our conference. The traffic around Chicago is some of the worst in the nation. And a lot of times when you play downtown, it's over an hour drive just to get to the airport. And even though it's not the longest flight, Chicago, Atlanta, you're not getting home before 3 o'clock in the morning. So then you're almost always better off to say, okay, well, we're going to give the players off on Sunday and then come in on Monday. But now you have the discussion of, okay, do we want to be in 5 days? Are we going to do a 5 day build? Do we have to take a midweek day off? And um, I almost find, as I'm saying, as much as you might have a clearly defined model in your head for these are my weekly microcycles, this is my preference, it ultimately comes down to home versus away, what travel looks like, when's the next game. And so, my preference is oftentimes and this probably comes from the tactical periodization side, to have a play on Saturday, have a Sunday off, and try to have a 5 day build with probably Thursday as a strong unload was probably my preference. But oftentimes it's not even possible with my preference, just based on what the travel might look like, because then you might be traveling out the next Friday as well for a long trip, and I might be going to play LA on a Friday and leaving on a Thursday, and everything that might shift. So um, again, I think this kind of ideal versus reality, really drives a lot of decision making when it comes to your weekly microcycle building.
Nice. And are you trying to plan it as I guess stability of the weeks as much as you can, or are you trying to peak at a certain point? Because I guess in the MLS it's often, like we saw with Inter Miami this season, it's the ones who win the cup aren't always the ones top of the
Yeah, yeah,
conferences or support
yeah. I
shield.
think
So
there's so much within our league. The huge challenge, I think, to our league from a physical standpoint is the meat of your season as you get into July, August, September. The temperatures can be just so brutally hot in so many different places, and it's how you manage that, which is a credit to Miami. Is Miami through the playoffs looked incredibly fresh this year. So really the goal is how can I arrive at the end of the year and have the freshest team possible. We've seen plenty of teams over the years, and in Florida and Texas in particular, that have these great seasons and they get to the playoffs and you can tell there's no freshness left because they've trained and they've pushed the group through these really hot months. And there is this kind of, chronic response to, heat, travel, etc., that just takes this toll if it's not managed appropriately. So again, my opinion is you're better off managing for freshness through some of those summer months, potentially at the expense of really driving training load on some days because you know what's coming. And it's interesting, as I've kind of talked to a lot of teams in the really warm weather climates. There's quite a few staffs, I think, in the really warm weather climates that they take 2 days off once they get in the summer months. It's Sunday, Monday off every single week
Mhm.
because it's too warm. And I don't know if Gavin, if you have seen that as well, but I have found that a lot of MLS teams are now going to a Sunday, Monday off, which, to be fair, will drive coaches crazy that come over from, from Europe, and they get, teams are used to doing things a certain way, and the players also get used to doing it because the players know they might need that for, to get the right amount of freshness, and then the coaching staff comes in and that's totally new for them, and they're not used to kind of working with that rhythm, and they want to train through those periods, and normally there's a cost to that. So
Yeah. Anything to add, Gavin, on that?
Yeah, I think if you look at, just like Dave said, like the season, at least for us, is a marathon. It's not a sprint. I do believe that it's going to become two sprints when it becomes more of a European and there's a big wedge because going to have longer than a Christmas break. But our marathon starts in March and ends all the way in December. And temperature wise, it kind of, as Dave was saying, when we get to the middle, the hardest kind of part, and then it's heat. If you think of Europe, it's almost the inverted. So you start hot in relative terms, but then in kind of December, it's almost cold. And I'd probably say that, well, I know that hot is going to take it way out of you more than cold. And then in Europe, it's cold everywhere. So all your games are cold. But in Austin, Texas, Houston, Dallas, these places, you go play there, you're lucky to come out with 1 point just because of the climatic challenges that are there. So I think it is a big challenge to do that physiologically. We were buying as many off days as we could to literally stay as fresh as we could. It was totally off the textbook periodization model, but it was like, hey, here's a period where we can take 2 days off. Here's a period, and we actually gave guys 4 days off. And then and I don't think that we were undertrained or underloaded at all. I think that we were just being very specific about where we could unload the starters. There was a period where the subs were not off and the starters were off. And that's always a difficult one to like, oh, where's that line that you draw? But you do risk unloading your subs a bit too much because especially in those density periods, the manager is almost playing his starting 11 regardless of how many games. And then we've done a number of second team players come in. Let's get because otherwise it's just small sided, small sided, small sided the whole time. And so we purposely bring in our second team, and then they're just like, hey, we don't really care what your periodization tells you, but today is going to be 11v11 against our subs to make sure that they're getting the right load. Because at any moment when those guys pop across and have to start games, if they've just gone through 3-4 weeks of small sided, yeah, then we're going to ask for trouble. So physiologically, and I mean, I've done the European circuit. I've been with European teams. I think physiologically, it's a more demanding league here in the MLS and a more difficult one to plan and navigate compared to the time that I spent in Europe.
Yeah, and James, I would add on that is that what I see is that context is very much king in the US in terms of big distances and environmental changes across the states. But therefore, the more years I've sort of been in the applied environment, I say this slightly with jest, but in some ways the schedule or the calendar is our lead sports scientist. That is the biggest determining factor to sort of planning and should we call it periodization. So yeah, I totally agree with what the guys say there.
Yeah, so you do a bit of a smile when Gavin said you just chuck in the reserve team in to kill them off.
Yeah.
But I guess that's an issue, isn't it, Adam? We see it in Europe as well, where the load management between the age groups when we do have
Yeah.
players shifting around, and I guess in America with the college stuff as well. So
Yeah.
is that such a big challenge
Oh
for you
yeah.
in your role?
Totally, and I've seen that in lots of sports and not just the MLS context I'm working in now. But for me, it always comes back to facilitation versus development. Are we actually just facilitating a session here, or is that best for that player's development? Now, I understand first team, is the cash cow for many clubs. However, that's my role at times to kind of fight for what's right for that playing group at times, while also, having empathy for the first team in terms of what they typically need. However, I'd be negligent to my role if I wasn't, to question at times the need to bring that player into a session as an example. But I totally understand, why Gavin, Dave, or Darcy, my superior in the club I work in, work in that environment.
Yeah, we do have a question actually from the audience, Adam, about what sort of profile of player do you think will dominate in the league in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, great question. So we know from visually, but also the data would support it that it is a very physical league. Working across the pathway setting and traveling with academy teams, etc., it's quite interesting to see how clubs are clearly profiling, identifying, and recruiting players based upon their game model. And there's some clubs that would be a nice technical style of player, and there's other environments that I see that there's obviously physical dominance is the priority. So I think we need to be cognizant that there's the MLS is a physically demanding league, but also there's a big European influence in terms of playing styles and ethos of player development.
Nice, brilliant. And I guess just to move on the conversation slightly, obviously we're on a Firstbeat webinar, so we need to talk about data and about monitoring as well. There's a couple of slides actually. I'm just going to attempt to share the screen. Please forgive me if this goes wrong. See that okay, everyone? Yes, hopefully.
Yeah, we can see that.
So this first one is, I guess, more about individual load management. So this shows some of the some example of Firstbeat data looking at trimp scores, and if for anyone who's used the software knows, you can set ranges and normative data for certain players to try and, I guess, manage things on more of an individual level. So has anyone on the panel got any thoughts around either specifically with Firstbeat or just in general how you manage players on an individual basis?
Yeah, James, I'll jump in just to say, just like I think all of us know, the kind of sprint distance profiling of players is very unique, right? The amount of high speed running that Sonny does is totally different than maybe one of our younger academy wingers or attackers. We've also got a high producing Gabon international winger, Denis Bouanga. And so it's our jobs to identify and understand our players and understand their outputs, their capacities, and what they can do. But the same applies for internal load as well. Like there's a very different response to the same training session when you look at three midfielders and when you look at defenders and when you look at forwards. And so if we're not spending the time to have a look and see how are our athletes responding individually to the training stimulus, then we're not being good practitioners. We're not leading these guys or evaluating sessions based on the individual that then dictates the collective rather than the other way around. We should never look at the total distance of a session for the team or the total high speed running for the team. It has to go down. You've got to drill down into the individual level. And Firstbeat's been outstanding in terms of individualizing trimp scores, because a trimp of 100 for me may be very high compared to another athlete where 100 is not high at all. And so we need to know those differences so that we can go, are our athletes being challenged enough, or are they actually being challenged too much in training? And yeah, I mean, we use more of a different software platform, very easily integratable with the Firstbeat data. But you have to drill down to the individual response of each athlete to know if everyone is really going in the right direction.
Nice. Any other thoughts, guys?
Yeah. I mean, I've been a huge fan of Firstbeat, and I kind of used it since around 2017, 2016, because I went and saw Darren Burgess in Australia use it, and have been, used it ever since. Again, I think that uh, uh, it's really around going back to this, kind of difference in climate. And I think one of the really big challenges within our league is that, players are fresh at the beginning of the season. You have a nice preseason, as Gavin alluded to. You can if you're not in a lot of competitions, you can have a first 8, 10 weeks where you're Saturday, you build kind of a nice chronic load. And then the heat comes, whether it's Austin, whether it's Atlanta, LA. you get to this period in June, July, you might be adding games and you really want to look at your internal response within training because all of the sudden a 6,000 meter Wednesday session where you want guys to get, whatever, 500, 800 meters of high speed running, that's a lot more difficult once you get to June or July than it was in March. And a lot of that is as players get through the season, but also it's very climate related as well, right? And so I think using this internal load, we use, especially in those Wednesday sessions, the training effect metric, trying to get every player within, a 4 to make sure they're getting, kind of the cardiovascular load that we'd like to. But also we've seen players at 5, right? We've seen players that don't normally would be okay, we would consider fit physiologically. And now they're, 4.6 to 5 training effect score, in part because of their response to the heat or lack of acclimatizing. So I think it's been proven to us in the last 4 to 5 years how important just going back and making sure we're tracking internal load, especially as we go through the warmer parts of the season where you want to drive mechanical loads in the field, but you're seeing when you look at the internal response, you might not always be able to drive the mechanical loads you could in March or April.
Yeah, do you feel as though we're a bit guilty sometimes of focusing on the external load in sports science?
1,000%. And also I think what ends up happening is we also, because of that, we end up calibrating our coaches around, hey, today's going to be a 5,500, 6,000 meter session. We want to get this amount of high speed running. And then you don't get there. But maybe all of a sudden it's a lot warmer day than, in July than it was early in the season. And now the coaches are thinking, well, we didn't get what we wanted out of the session. We always want to get 6,000 meters in the session. We're not getting 6,000 meters today. So I think it's also how we externally communicate what our expectations are, through some of the external load data that we've just calibrate everyone around us around.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, you've obviously been around the scene for a while and worked in Olympic sports as well. Do you feel as though, heart rate, we've had it for decades now? Is it slowly making a return to the thought?
Yeah, definitely. It's there's no doubt of the impact it can have, and I think we all have benefited from, external load and GPS, but it's kind of a bit like fashion. It's sort of the heart rate data is coming back in vogue for a reason. And then I think if I answer the data sort of topic here deliberately with my, academy and long-term player development head on, the data obviously gives me as an practitioner working in an academy setting and an ability to compare to first team, second team environment and how we can prepare the player, to tolerate the load as they move through programs. But that obviously needs to have the individual bit in mind that Gavin mentioned. And, so therefore the heart rate and the internal load is an important consideration within that individual and not comparing between individuals, but also how can we use other data to essentially better prepare players for, their development and their progress through, the development pathway.
Yeah,
James,
nice.
can I ask Adam a question, James?
Take
Adam,
my job, that's fine.
Yeah.
thank you, John. When you have second team players come up and train with the first team, kind of what percentage increase? I know it's a bit of a blanket statement, but what kind of percentage increase internal load do you notice? Just because the speed of the game is so much quicker, there's the nerves and the kind of anxiety factor as well. Like just from an internal load perspective, do you have like a range that you think is normalized of an academy player coming up and training?
Yeah, I wouldn't like to put a number on it, but
Yeah.
what I would definitely say is that yes, 99% of the players that go through that experience will say, even on a weekly basis, will say, that is way harder than the typical environment I've been working in. And obviously that tells you a lot, but um, it's our ability as practitioners to prepare them for that. And it is a reality of the world we work in where there is going to be player movement between programs.
Yeah.
So preparing for, not the worst case scenario, but the realities of essentially what they're going to be asked to do as they move through programs. But I think, a lot of that can be managed and navigated around with, good connection across the whole program in terms of, good performance alignment, in terms of data shared, approaches to training models, etc. But also at an even, higher club level, the philosophy and the playing model of the club is consistent across all the groups, and therefore, a high pressing team with more acceleration deceleration demands, that's consistent across all teams rather than say the first team only and a second
Yeah.
team player stepping up and struggling with that specific exposure itself.
Yeah. No, really good because James, just practically, we often get about anything between 5 and 7 second team players involved in our preseason, anything up to about 4 or 5 weeks. Dave was mentioning that kind of earlier in the webinar, just kind of the challenges of players coming at different phases and stages in the season. We often will have a big group of guys, and be that if guys are away on international duty or new signings coming in and waiting for that. And we've found kind of success in from week one, we assigned one of our first team strength and conditioning coaches to that group, and we spent a lot of time analyzing their data as well. And I know that it's kind of not traditional to go into a lot of recovery methods early on in preseason because you want that stress and adaptation response. But I threw that out the window with these academy players. And from week one, we're focusing on a lot of recovery methods, just discussions. Hey, how are you feeling? What are we going to do before? Because we understand this big jump in internal as well as external load that they're having to be exposed to. So you need to have a plan. If you're going to have an academy player in for a significant number of training sessions, and I think that 3 or 4 weeks, especially during preseason, is significant. A one-off training session, middle of the season, everyone's not going to be too worried about that. But a significant period, you need to have a plan. As a practitioner, you need to have a plan on how to adapt those players to the environment that they're stepping into.
Yeah.
I think it's a great point, Gavin, actually, and something I saw quite a lot at Liverpool as well, although some time ago now. And unfortunately, yeah, you get those academy players come up and, like you say, they have that anxiety and that initial spike in internal load. And then the ones who, ultimately end up having it and making it, well, the ones who stabilize over time. And I've seen
Yeah.
so many, unfortunately, just crash and burn because they just can't cope with the demands, the technical aspects, the stress, and these various things. So I think it's a great point how internal load can help support those decisions around, when to deload, when to push the guys a little bit further as well.
Yeah.
I'm just going to show this slide as well. Hopefully that works. Yeah. So you've probably, many in the audience as well, has probably seen this recent article from Martin Boucher talking about I guess, almost revisiting the whole dose response relationship between heart rate and adaptation. So probably one of the main headlines from this article was around about 30 minutes a week in, I guess, what people would call the red zone, above 90% heart rate max, is enough to keep people ticking over in terms of aerobic fitness. But interestingly, I was shared this data by Firstbeat, where based on their database, there's actually not, less than half of or 50% actually meet that criteria. Now, I have a suspicion that might be due to a lack of match data with some teams, but does anyone want to any thoughts around either the paper or this slide in particular?
I would probably agree. I mean, I think I would agree with Martin's conclusion. The players should hopefully, with games, getting 30 minutes per week and over to maintain fitness. I also think that we're also kind of coming to this conflict around how coaches want to train, I think, as well today, methodologies, and like a lot of the methodologies around, positional play, small, tight, high intensity exercises, lots of pattern play type work that I think that when I see this, I think I don't know if many center backs ever get that much based on the way that we train, right? And you have to, I think, be relatively careful around some of the mechanical demands and the small tight X cells and D cells that you put center backs through. And then there's lots of sessions where they're basically, circulating the ball in the back for certain exercises. And so I do think there are certain positions within the way certain coaches develop their methodology that are probably undertrained just based on how training sessions are organized and run today, in elite soccer. So there's probably less open running 7v7s, 8v8s, things like that than I think there used to be. It's a lot more positional, tactical, etc.
Yeah, and then added to that, James, I see there's a bit of research coming out now from Andrew Usher's group, and some of it's come from sort of combat sports, but in terms of, applying, say, off-feet conditioning to soccer environments. And, we don't necessarily have to chase that red zone exposure within game, but how can we safely do it outside a game without, adding fatigue or overcooking the player. So I think we as practitioners need to sort of understand, as you say, how can we get that needed exposure in a week through the context of normal training, and if not, what does it look like outside of that to ensure that threshold is met on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, James, for me, I think it's again that athlete specific and knowing which athletes. There are some of my players that have no problem in hitting that. Sometimes even in one session, they're going to be hitting 25 or more minutes in red zone. And they're outliers on the accumulation of red zone. And then to Dave's point, there are some center backs that I can't get any red zone minutes out of them in a training session, a regular football, and the way that we play and train. So I think that you got to start identifying some of your worst case cases, and that would for me be a center back that's not a starting center back, that is one of those center backs that really struggles to get them in training. And so then what are the challenges and how do we actually achieve some of those? And then putting in some kind of conditional work or conditional runs where we can actually, even if we just get to 15 minutes in the week, we're doing something more than absolutely nothing. So again, knowing your players, knowing them well, are they game minutes or game red zones? Are they training red zones? And kind of what are you going into? Are you going into a lot of games or not a lot of games? So yeah, you have to plan this out, and you need to have a good game plan, especially for those guys that struggle to get the red zone minutes and then all of a sudden have to step into the game environment, in which then case they do get it, but they're underprepared for it.
Yeah, and I guess just to layer on top of this as well, I'd be interested to find out if you guys are using any sort of readiness markers to do with heart rate, HRV or any sub-maximal testing, anything like this.
Yeah, we're HRV. We do a lot of HRV testing, and use that as a readiness score for our players.
Nice.
Yeah, Chicago first team would be doing heart rate recovery runs on a sort of standardized day of a week. And it's something I have used in previous environments and sort of reflecting upon in terms of its application further down the pathway.
Yeah. How do you find the players, logistically, how that goes with the players, Adam?
Yeah, well, I can only comment from sort of viewing it, but I've seen it sort of standardized, rolled out as part of the training session on a given day. For me, it comes back to good communication to the players around, the rationale for it and the reasoning behind doing it. Therefore, getting that buy-in alongside ensuring the reliability of the data. Well, how can we compare this week to last week, and what were the protocols around, training is testing from an heart rate recovery perspective?
Yeah, very good point about reliability as well. And I think sometimes that's what puts people off heart rate is
Yeah.
unfortunately, you get the odd spikes in data, and you
Yeah.
do have to really ensure the quality and things that you get. And I must admit, I've used Firstbeat myself, and we've got Firstbeat users here. It is a higher quality of belt that you tend to get with the company. So I think that's super important for people to look at.
Mm.
Dave, any thoughts around readiness testing?
Yeah, I mean, prior to this year, I used HRV heavily. This was probably the first year I did not use HRV, and I think I did miss it. Part of it is readiness. I think part of it is also the um, individualization around recovery methods and who tends to be more kind of sympathetically driven and who's more parasympathetically driven post game. This year we used more biomarkers and then force plate testing as a athlete monitoring tool more than HRV, which was interesting for me to try, I think, for the first year, but there are definitely elements to that around recovery tools that I felt like I missed not having HRV.
Very interesting. So we've got about 10 minutes left of the session. So what I'll do now is I'll just open the floor to questions. So let me get my screen back up. So we've got quite a few here already. Let me just pick some out. So we have a question here from Adam Moore. So he's asked the question, is there any low-tech strategies to use with younger players, particularly in high school level? So maybe I'll direct that one to you, Adam.
Sorry, my reception cut out there. Repeat that again, James.
Oh, sorry. So it's just a question of what low-tech strategies can you use with younger players, I guess, to monitor, things like high school level.
Yeah, well, relationships, good communication, being having the ability to connect with the athlete when they arrive on site. For me, that's still an important aspect, be it at a, professional level or a high school level. I think it's really creating those opportunities where you can, you know, see where meet the player where they're at on a daily basis and then apply it from there. Having good conversations and good open communication lines, doesn't cost us anything. And then added to that, obviously, there's easy ways to, collect subjective data, with players. It doesn't even necessarily always have to be through sort of an MS system. You can be creating your own systems and processes. But yeah. I wouldn't say technology or budget has to be a limiting factor there.
Nice. Thanks very much. We'll go with this one from Marcio. This one's actually for Dave. It's been signposted to Dave. So the question is around the integration of predictive analytics. So how close is the MLS to using this more to forecast things like individual technical trends and which players are going to reach their full potential?
Oof. That's more around. Let me see if I can see it there. There it is. Individual technical trend. Yeah, I think again, I think there's so much complexity around player development and the technical and tactical, and I think teams are doing a far better job profiling on the physical side. I think now with some of the tech around 1080 view motion, being able to merge kind of, kinetics and kinematics. I think we're doing a really good job forecasting potentially how players can improve when it comes to the physical. I mean, obviously the holy grail is how much someone can improve on the technical side and what, you forecasting out who technically is going to be able to do it. The only thing that I would say is I think that the players within our league, there's very few central technical players that come out of the American Academy system. They have to be really special. I would say you have to be a really special technical player as an American Academy player to kind of make it through. And a lot of our Academy players that get homegrown contracts tend to be the wide players that are very athletic. That I think we do a good job profiling. In terms of sprint mechanics, change of directions, etc. But I think to me that's the next area I think in terms of player development is the profiling and really trying to make athletes a better athlete at the right age, right? And I think that's why you're having people like Adam being hired into roles to try to get the exposure to the right coaching and running technical training, I guess, at the right age.
Nice. Thanks very much, Dave. Maybe I'll shoot this one to Gavin next. The question is from, let me see if I find it, from Richard. Just mentioning what are the best days you would recommend to get your red zone minutes during the week? Would it be a match day -4, 3, 2, or anything on -1?
I think that at least in the model that we've been applying at LAFC, it would be a -3. We'd be getting the majority of our red zone minutes in the -3. We do a 4-day lead in. Again, we're not a Saturday to Saturday with like the option of having kind of consistent 5-day lead ins, just with the sheer number of games that we're playing. So often our -3 is our big day. The players know it. It's well known. We communicate that as well. And then we will do a number of MD+1, just like I think most practitioners will do with our subs. We will be getting a small sided game in. We're getting technical drills in. We're getting some conditional drills in. Maybe if it's MD+1 and there's a runway for me, I'll then do my high speed running on that MD+1 rather than post game. Especially if it was a home game and then MD+1 back at the training facility. So sometimes, again, depending on your periodization, maybe less on the red zone minutes, but sometimes I have to spread my high speed running over 2 days rather than just having one big spike day. Dave was alluding to kind of that 6 kilometer, 500 and something meters of high speed running. Sometimes I actually break that up over 2 days, just again, depending on what we've come out of, what's the density of games or how much traveling have we done and what are we going into. Sometimes I split that high speed running up over 2 days. And that's not consistently. It's not every single week I'm doing that because then I don't think that would be a good plan. But sometimes I think it's a good plan to split that up. And you could probably do that with red zone minute or kind of extensive endurance training as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I guess a lot of models kind of pair two high load days together back to back, and something I've been having a lot of conversations with practitioners lately is should we actually space that out more? So
Yeah.
there's some recent research around, having a almost like a deload day in between and then going high again, then go low again. Maybe that could be a solution, but yeah, I think there's different ways we can do it. Fantastic. We'll go back round to Adam. Keep you on your toes. Next one is around managing load, particularly for those who do supplementary training outside of the academy. So how you manage that situation.
Yeah, it's a good question because it's becoming more prevalent in lots of environments, and it's not going to go away. Um, for me, it's very much having the conversation with the player around, their developmental needs, specifically how we in club in the training center are going after those and the reasoning for them to look to do other bits outside. There may be reasoning and rationale behind it, and therefore there doesn't need to be any pushback from the internal staff. But often I think, information is so easy to get now that a lot of the sort of, um, p- young athletes coming through now, they can get that information and they may think this a thing that they've seen online, whatever it may be, is the best thing for them. But maybe they're actually already getting that exposure in the club environment, or maybe they're actually getting it outside the club environment at the wrong time. So I start with the rationale, the communication, and the education of the player, and then decide where or if we go further with sort of external support.
Yeah, it's such a hard one, isn't it, to track everything? And it's almost you become a big brother almost, and you've got to at least give them some responsibility at that age as well. Probably got time for one last one. We have another one listed for Dave, which is about which biomarkers you've found useful this season in terms of overall health and readiness.
And we spent the year collecting data using the Oracle system, right? So we looked at C-reactive protein and then oxidative stress markers. So, I mean, I think the theory is you're looking at response to game loads and looking at how they're from an oxidative stress standpoint, how they responded inflammation from C-reactive proteins, and hopefully comparing that to baseline over long periods of time. I think one of the challenges is you have to collect a lot of data. You have to create a really sound baseline with a lot of data points, one. And two, I think C-reactive protein tends to be fairly variable over when you take it. So trying to take it a very consistent time, which is challenging as well with our schedule. So I would say I think we got pretty good snapshot using it this year, but I think again I would hate to draw too many conclusions after just kind of one season's worth of data. So definitely want to collect more.
Yeah, definitely an interesting area. Like you say, there's a lot of variability with the biomarkers, and it's about trying to smooth that data out essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll bring the session to a close, guys. So I just want to say thanks very much for to Gavin, Dave, and Adam for the time. Like I say, it's the off season. I know Gavin's off to the beach now, I think, after this in South Africa, which is nice, and the rest of us will be stuck in the cold. But I'll hand over to Tina just to do some final words.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys, for a really great discussion and interesting insights. And we did have some questions left that we were not able to get to yet. Our team, our sports guys, will reach out to some individuals directly if it was a very specific Firstbeat related question, and we might send a few of them over to one of you guys also if it was specific to you. But thanks for all the participants. We had a lot of people online. We'll send the recording and the thank you email tomorrow, and that way you'll have our contact information and can reach out us if you want to ask more. Brilliant discussion. Thank you. Hope everyone has a happy holiday season and some relaxation before the new year kicks in.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for turning up.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tina. Thanks. Bye-bye.